I was coming back to a place I used to call home, but if I'm being honest, it hadn't felt like that in years. My name is Ryan. I'm 29, a former combat medic in the Army, and I've spent the last 5 years overseas. Long nights in desert outposts patching up brothers in arms, hoping to make it back to a family that never really seemed to notice my absence. I've always been the type to give to sacrifice to take care of others before myself. That's just the kind of man I became, partly out of duty, partly out of habit, and maybe a little because I was always the one overlooked. It had been almost 4 years since I'd seen my family in person, not because I didn't want to, but because distance felt safer. There are only so many times you can walk into a room full of people who share your blood but not your pulse and pretend you belong. Still this year, for the first time in ages, I let myself believe it might be different. I had managed to secure a Christmas leave, a rare window to reconnect. I imagined my mom's teary-eyed hug, my dad's firm handshake, maybe even my sister Laura asking about my life for once. I should have known better. When I texted my family about my leave, I kept it simple. Got the dates coming home for Christmas. Can't wait to see everyone. My mom replied with a single heart emoji. No words, just a tiny red heart. I tried not to read too much into it, telling myself she was just busy or overwhelmed. I wanted to believe they'd be excited to see me, not just the guy who wires money every month like a walking ATM. But that small hollow response sat in my gut like a stone. Then 12 days before my flight, my phone buzzed in the middle of a quiet night at the base. It was a message from my dad. Christmas is better without you. Don't come. I read it twice, hoping it was a glitch, a mistake, maybe even some dark attempt at a joke. But then my sister chimed in a follow-up text, lighting up my screen. It'll just make things weird. Please don't come. I just stared at those messages, my thumb hovering over the reply button, heart thudding like the sound of boots in a distant firefight. I could have asked why, demanded an explanation, but what was the point? They'd already made their choice, a choice that cut deeper than any shrapnel wound. I typed a single word. Understood. People like to think soldiers are made of steel, unbreakable, but that's a lie we tell ourselves. The truth is, we're just as human as anyone else, and in that moment my chest felt tight, my throat raw, like something inside me had shifted permanently. I'd spent years sending half my paycheck home, covering utility bills, paying my sister's car insurance, even sending money for the mortgage. I thought that's what family did, supported each other. But standing there in the cold fluorescent light of the barracks hallway, I realized I had just been a faceless bank account to them. That night, a different kind of resolve settled in my bones. Not anger, not vengeance, just clarity. I logged into every account tied to my name. The joint utility account. I removed myself. My sister's car insurance that quietly bled my wallet dry each month canceled. And the mortgage I had been covering for 3 years, a house I didn't even have a key to. I sent a formal email to the lender informing them that I would no longer be contributing financially and that all further communication should be directed to the primary borrower, my father. As I clicked through each form, shutting down every lifeline they had quietly, almost imperceptibly attached to me, I felt a strange kind of peace, like closing a wound that had festered too long. I still took my flight home even though they had explicitly told me not to come. I landed 2 days before Christmas, took a cab straight to a small nameless motel on the edge of town, and checked into a room with paper-thin walls and a flickering neon sign outside that buzzed like a mosquito. I didn't go by the house, didn't call, didn't reach out. I just waited. 2 days before Christmas, my phone started ringing off the hook. Missed calls, voicemails piling up like snow against a forgotten door. My dad, my sister, even an unknown number that turned out to be their lawyer. I didn't answer any of them. I had already said everything I needed to with that single word, understood. That night, I walked down to the gas station across from the motel, bought a cheap bottle of whiskey, and sat on the scratchy bedspread staring at the chipped paint on the wall. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Just tired. Tired of being the invisible son, the forgotten brother, the dependable but unremarkable fixture in a family that had long since stopped seeing me. I took a long, bitter sip, letting the burn settle in my chest, and whispered to the empty room, "Merry Christmas." I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone vibrating against the motel's cheap, cracked nightstand. 7 missed calls, my dad, my sister, and a number I vaguely recognized but couldn't place. I didn't bother listening to the voicemails. I just watched the missed call notifications stack up, as if they could somehow form an apology or maybe a demand through sheer volume. By noon, my sister had sent a text. "This isn't fair. You're blowing this out of proportion. At least talk to Dad." I tossed my phone onto the bed, staring at the stained ceiling tiles, counting the watermarks. I should have felt something. Regret, anger, maybe even satisfaction. But instead, I just felt numb. Like I'd finally stepped back far enough to see the whole picture, and it was even uglier than I'd let myself admit. After a while, I forced myself to get up, pulling on my jacket and stepping out into the freezing December air. The sidewalk outside the motel was cracked, dusted with a thin layer of snow that hadn't quite figured out how to stick. It reminded me of this place, a town that had always seemed a little too cold, a little too fragile, a little too broken. I walked down to the corner diner, the kind that still served coffee in chipped white mugs, and played old country songs on a loop. I sat in a booth by the window, watched a couple argue over their breakfast, and let the warmth soak into my bones. When the waitress came by, I ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Just bitter and straightforward, like the way I'd come to see my family. My mind drifted as I waited for the cup to cool enough to sip. I thought about the first time I realized I was different. Not just another cog in the family machine, but something other, a ghost in the house I grew up in. I must have been about 8, sitting in the back seat of my dad's old truck, while my sister sat up front chattering away about her dance recital. My dad listened, nodding, chuckling at her every word while I sat quietly counting the telephone poles as they whipped by. He didn't ask about my day, my friends, or my classes. I might as well have been invisible. Years later, when I enlisted, it had been the same. My mom cried, my sister shrugged, and my dad just said, "Figures. You always were the quiet one." It hadn't felt like a farewell, more like a formality. A box checked a brief inconvenience before they went back to their lives. The waitress refilled my cup without asking, and I forced myself to focus on the present. It was Christmas Eve, and I was alone in a diner that smelled like burned toast and stale coffee, the kind of place where the only decorations were a single plastic wreath and a crooked string of half-dead lights over the counter. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced at the screen. Another message from my sister. "You're being childish. Just come by the house. Let's fix this." I put the phone face down on the table, watching the steam curl off my coffee. Fix what exactly? The years of being the family ghost, the endless bank transfers that had quietly kept their lives afloat while I was thousands of miles away, bleeding in the sand, and counting the days until my next leave. I shook my head, feeling the familiar weight settle in my chest. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the bills, the missed payments, the sudden realization that their crutch had walked away. As I stood to leave, I dropped a few crumpled bills on the table and pulled my hood up against the sharp wind outside. I walked past the old church on the corner, its bells ringing hollow in the gray afternoon, and turned down the street that led to my old neighborhood. I didn't stop. Didn't look at the house I had once called home. Just kept my head down, hands shoved deep in my pockets, breath coming out in short, frosty bursts. I didn't know where I was going, just that it was somewhere other than there. Christmas morning came gray and quiet, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I stared at the flickering neon sign outside my motel window, half blinded by the buzzing green glow. No stockings, no tree, no carols, just the hum of the heater, struggling to keep the small room above freezing. My phone had gone silent overnight, like they'd finally realized I wasn't going to pick up. Maybe they were sitting around the tree right now, pretending I was just late or that I'd walk through the door any minute. Maybe they'd even set a place for me at the table more out of habit than actual hope. I thought about all the holidays I'd missed, the birthdays, the graduations, the quiet Sunday dinners, all the times I'd chosen duty over family. Thinking that when I finally came home, I'd be met with open arms, a proud smile, a welcome back that felt like more than an afterthought. But that wasn't my family. It never had been. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't a call. It was a message, a long one from my dad. "Ryan, enough of this. You've made your point. Your mother's been crying all morning and your sister is in a state. We're still your family. Come home." I read it twice, fingers gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could almost hear his voice, that deep, gravelly tone he used when he was more annoyed than concerned, when he was trying to reel me back in without admitting he'd crossed a line. But it was too late for that. I tossed the phone onto the bed and grabbed my jacket. The cold air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside, my breath forming thick white clouds that hung in the air for a moment before dissolving into the gray sky. I walked to the small park down the street, the one I used to cut through on my way to school as a kid, back when I still believed in things like family and home. The playground was empty, the swings creaking in the wind, their metal chains clinking like distant gunfire. I found a bench under a leafless tree, its bare branches twisting against the pale winter sky like gnarled fingers. I sat down, the cold seeping through my jeans, and let the silence settle over me. I thought about the time my sister crashed her first car, the one I'd helped her buy. She'd called me crying, her voice shaking as she told me about the dented fender, the smashed headlight, the insurance hike that would push her over the edge. I hadn't hesitated, hadn't even thought twice before wiring her the money to cover the repairs. I remembered the time my parents' heating went out in the middle of a brutal January, the pipes freezing, the bills stacking up. I'd sent them nearly my entire month's paycheck, telling myself it was just temporary, that they'd find their footing again soon. And then I thought about the text I'd gotten from my sister just last month asking for help with a down payment on a new car. Not even a hint of gratitude, just a casual, "Hey, can you spot me a few grand? I'll pay you back eventually." Eventually? Like my sacrifices had an expiration date, like I was just a line of credit they could tap into whenever they felt like it. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over my dad's message, the words blurring as my eyes filled with a sudden, unexpected heat. For a moment, I almost gave in, almost convinced myself that I should just go back, play my part, be the good son, the reliable brother, the invisible wallet. But then I remembered the Christmas Eve 4 years ago, the last time I'd been home. My parents had thrown a party, the house full of people, the air thick with the smell of roast turkey and cinnamon. I'd walked in still in my dress blues, hoping for a moment of recognition, a handshake, a hug, something to make the months away feel worthwhile. Instead, my dad had clapped my sister on the back, raising his glass in a toast. To the one who's always there for us, he'd said, his voice booming the guests. Raising their glasses, my sister beaming as she soaked in the applause. I'd stood there, my hand half raised, the words of my own toast caught in my throat, and realized I was a ghost in my own home. I closed my eyes, feeling the cold bite into my skin, the wind cutting through my jacket like a knife. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't bother looking at it. I'd already made my choice. I stood, shoving my hands deep into my pockets, and turned back toward the motel. The air felt sharper, the sky a shade darker, but for the first time in a long time, my steps felt lighter, my breath coming a little easier. I wasn't walking away, I was walking free. By the time I got back to the motel, the sun had dipped behind the tree line, casting long skeletal shadows across the parking lot. I brushed the snow off my boots and stepped inside, the warmth hitting me like a wave, thick and musty, the kind of heat that clings to old carpets and cracked wallpaper. I tossed my jacket over the back of the chair, letting it hang like the weight I'd just dropped from my shoulders. I flicked on the lamp beside the bed, its dull yellow glow struggling to push back the encroaching darkness. My phone was still buzzing, notifications stacking up like artillery fire, each one a reminder of the family I'd walked away from. I ignored it, grabbing the whiskey bottle from the nightstand, unscrewing the cap with a quick practice twist. I poured a shot into the plastic cup the motel had generously provided, watched the amber liquid swirl under the dim light, then downed it in one rough gulp. It burned, but I welcomed the sting, the slow spreading warmth that settled in my chest like a small defiant fire. I sank onto the bed, the springs creaking beneath my weight, and let my head fall back against the headboard. I closed my eyes, feeling the alcohol loosen the tight knots in my muscles, and let my mind wander back to the house I hadn't visited in years. It had never felt like home, not really. Not the way my cramped barracks or dusty desert tents had. Home was supposed to be a refuge, a place where you felt seen, known, loved. But for me, it had always been a place of quiet dismissal. A house filled with the echoes of other people's voices, other people's priorities. I remembered the summer after I graduated high school, my last summer at home before I enlisted. I'd worked double shifts at the local gas station, saving every penny for a down payment on a used car, hoping it would buy me a little freedom, a small taste of independence. Then one humid July evening, my dad had pulled me aside, his face set in that grim, expectant way he had when he was about to deliver a speech. "Your sister's car broke down again. She needs a new one. Figured you wouldn't mind helping out." I'd opened my mouth to protest, to explain that I'd been saving for months, that I'd already made plans, but the look in his eyes, the silent, heavy demand had shut me down before I could get a single word out. The next morning, my savings were gone, transferred to my sister's account, and she drove off in a shiny secondhand sedan while I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, watching the dust settle behind her tires. I opened my eyes, the memory leaving a bitter taste in my mouth, and poured another shot. This time, I let it sit on my tongue a little longer, savoring the burn before swallowing. I could hear the muffled sounds of a couple arguing in the room next door, their voices rising and falling like waves against the thin walls. I wondered if my family was doing the same right now. If my dad was pacing the living room, grumbling about my ingratitude, my sister sulking in the corner, my mom dabbing at her eyes with a crumpled tissue, whispering about how I'd ruined Christmas. The thought should have hurt, should have stung like a fresh wound, but it didn't. Instead, I felt a strange, weightless kind of relief, like I'd finally stopped carrying a burden I hadn't even realized I was holding. I glanced at my phone, the screen still lit with a fresh text from my dad. "Don't do this, Ryan. We're still a family. Come back. Let's work this out." I shook my head, dropping the phone back onto the bed. They still didn't get it. They never had. I reached for the remote, flicking on the TV, letting the white noise drown out the echoes of my own thoughts. Some old black and white Christmas movie flickered to life on the screen, the characters singing about peace on earth and goodwill toward men. I snorted, pouring myself another drink, and let my head fall back against the headboard again. Peace. Goodwill. Concepts that felt as distant as the battlefields I'd left behind. As the night stretched on, the whiskey worked its slow magic, dulling the sharp edges of my thoughts, softening the hard lines of my memories. I drifted in and out of a light, fitful sleep, the flickering light from the TV casting long shadows across the cracked ceiling. At some point, I must have turned off the TV, or maybe it had just given up on me, because when I woke up, the room was dark. The only light coming from the thin line of moonlight slipping through the gap in the curtains. I sat up, the room spinning for a moment before settling into a manageable tilt. I glanced at my phone again, the screen dark and silent, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something like hope. I wasn't sure what came next. Maybe I'd pack my things in the morning, head west. Find a place where my name wasn't just a line item in someone else's budget, where my worth wasn't measured in dollars and cents. Maybe I'd find a home that felt like one. Or maybe I thought, leaning back against the headboard with a slow, satisfied sigh, I'd just keep driving until the road ran out. Either way, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't looking back. The next morning, I woke to a thin strip of gray light cutting through the curtains, the kind of weak winter sunlight that doesn't so much brighten a room as expose its flaws. I rubbed my eyes, the sharp sting of whiskey still clinging to my throat, and swung my legs over the side of the bed. My phone was lying on the nightstand, face down, the battery teetering near zero. I picked it up, thumbing the power button, and watched as the screen flickered to life, a fresh stack of messages waiting in the notification bar. I scrolled through them, out of habit, my eyes scanning the familiar names. My dad, my sister, my mom. Even a couple of numbers I didn't recognize, probably mutual relatives, their loyalties split like old cracked wood. I opened the first message, my sister's words lighting up the screen in cold, pixelated clarity. "Why are you doing this? Ryan, you're being dramatic. Just come home. Stop making this a bigger deal than it is." I leaned back against the headboard, my free hand curling into a fist. Dramatic. That word hit a nerve. I'd been called a lot of things over the years. Quiet, distant, even cold, but dramatic. That one felt like a slap in the face, a complete disregard for the years I'd spent in the background, the silent, unseen supporter. I swiped to the next message, this one from my dad. "Ryan, I'm trying to keep this family together, but you're making it impossible. Just come home. Let's talk this out." I clenched my jaw, feeling my pulse quicken, the familiar heat of suppressed anger creeping up my spine. Keep the family together. That was rich, coming from the man who'd made me feel like an outsider for as long as I could remember. I tossed the phone onto the bed, standing up too quickly, the room tilting dangerously for a moment before righting itself. I stumbled to the small, grimy bathroom, gripping the sink for support as I stared into the streaked, cracked mirror. My reflection stared back, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, a stranger in a familiar face. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock snapping me out of my daze, and straightened up, letting the water drip from my chin splatter against the yellowed porcelain. I looked at myself for a long moment, the silence pressing in around me like a physical weight, and whispered, "What the hell are you doing?" I walked back into the room, grabbed my jacket off the chair, and shoved my phone into my pocket. I needed air, needed to feel the cold bite into my skin, needed to remember what it felt like to be alive, to be free. I stepped outside, the icy wind cutting through my thin jacket, the sky a flat, endless gray like the inside of a metal drum. I walked aimlessly for a while, my breath fogging in the cold air, my boots crunching against the frozen sidewalk. I passed a small strip mall, its windows plastered with neon signs advertising payday loans and pawn shops, the kind of place where desperation and bad decisions met over cheap coffee and too many regrets. I kept walking, my mind a swirling storm of half-formed thoughts and unspoken words, the echoes of my family's messages ringing in my ears. Eventually, I found myself at the edge of the town, standing at the mouth of a frozen river, its surface cracked and splintered like a broken mirror. I shoved my hands deep into my pockets, staring down at the ice, the slow, sluggish current barely visible beneath the jagged surface. For a moment, I let myself imagine walking out onto that ice, feeling it creak and groan beneath my weight, pushing forward until the crack splintered and spread until the cold water swallowed me whole. But I didn't. Instead, I turned away, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts, and walked back the way I had come, my steps quickening with each block, my mind finally starting to clear. By the time I got back to the motel, my fingers were numb, my nose tingling with the sting of frostbite. I fumbled with the key, shoving it into the lock, and stumbled inside, the warmth hitting me like a slap. I collapsed onto the bed, my breath still coming in ragged gasps, and pulled my phone from my pocket, my thumb hovering over the power button for a long, tense moment. Then, with a deep, shuddering breath, I turned it on. The screen flickered to life, the messages still waiting like ghosts clinging to the edge of my consciousness. I scrolled through them again, my heart pounding in my chest, and felt something break loose inside me. I opened the message from my sister, the one where she'd called me dramatic, and started typing, my fingers flying across the screen with a sharp, angry precision. Dramatic. You think this is dramatic? You have no idea what I've given up. What I've sacrificed just to keep this family afloat. I'm done being your safety net. I'm done being your ghost. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, the message disappearing into the ether, a small, silent act of rebellion. I tossed the phone onto the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, my heart racing, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. For the first time in years, I felt something like control, like I'd finally taken a step out of the shadows and into the light. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the room seep into my bones, and whispered to the empty air, "Let them figure it out." When I woke the next morning, the world outside my window was blanketed in fresh snow, the kind that covers everything in a quiet, suffocating stillness. I lay there for a moment, staring at the gray light filtering through the cracked curtains, my breath fogging in the cold air. My phone sat on the nightstand, the battery down to its last few percent, its screen dark and silent. For the first time in days, I didn't reach for it. I just sat up, rubbed my eyes, and tried to remember the last time I'd felt this calm, this untethered. I pulled on my jacket, slipped my feet into my boots, and stepped outside, the icy wind biting at my face, stinging my eyes. The parking lot was empty, the motel sign buzzing softly in the distance, its neon letters flickering like a broken heartbeat. I walked down the street, my boots crunching against the fresh snow, my breath coming in short, visible bursts. The town felt different, quieter, like it had finally let go of the last threads of the holiday season. Christmas lights still hung from the eaves of the old brick buildings, but their colors had faded, their purpose forgotten. I found myself at the old diner again, the one with the chipped mugs and sticky tables, the bell above the door chiming softly as I pushed my way inside. The place was mostly empty, just a couple of tired-looking regulars hunched over their coffee, their faces lined with the kind of hard years that leave permanent marks. I took a seat by the window, the glass cold against my shoulder, and watched as the waitress shuffled over, her apron stained and her hair pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense bun. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice as tired as her eyes. I nodded, and she poured a steaming cup, the black liquid swirling in the chipped mug like a dark, bitter promise. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, letting the heat seep into my frozen fingers, and took a slow, careful sip. It tasted as bitter as I felt, sharp and unapologetic, the kind of coffee that leaves a mark. As I sat there, staring out the window at the empty street, my mind drifted back to my family, to the house I hadn't set foot in for years, to the voices I'd let define me for too long. I thought about my sister, her dismissive texts, the way she'd brushed off my absence like a minor inconvenience. I thought about my dad, his constant demands, his sharp, cutting words, the way he'd always made me feel small, insignificant, a shadow in my own life. And then I thought about my mom, the way she used to kiss my forehead when I was a kid, the way she'd laugh at my terrible jokes, the way she'd quietly stand by while my dad and sister pushed me to the sidelines, her silence a passive betrayal. I closed my eyes, took another long, slow sip of coffee, and let the bitterness settle in my bones. I wasn't going back. Not this time. The bell above the door chimed again, and I glanced up, my heart skipping a beat as a familiar figure stepped inside. It was my Uncle Tom, his face lined with years of hard work and harder choices, his eyes sharp behind his thick, wire-rimmed glasses. He spotted me, his face breaking into a slow, weary smile, and made his way over, pulling out the chair across from me with a heavy sigh. "Didn't expect to see you here, kid," he said, his voice rough but warm, the kind of voice that carries a lifetime of unspoken truths. I managed a small, tired smile. "Didn't expect to be here." He nodded, folding his hands on the table, his eyes searching my face, the lines around his mouth deepening as he took me in. "Heard you're not coming home for Christmas." I looked down at my coffee, the steam rising in slow, ghostly tendrils, and shook my head. "Not this year. Maybe not ever." He didn't say anything for a long moment, just leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping a slow, thoughtful rhythm against the tabletop. Finally, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. You know, Ryan, sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. I felt my chest tighten, my throat constrict, and looked up, meeting his steady, knowing gaze. It doesn't feel brave, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. It feels like giving up. He smiled, a small, bittersweet twist of his lips, and reached across the table, placing his calloused hand over mine. No kid. Giving up is staying in a place that breaks you just because you're too scared to leave. I stared at him, my eyes stinging, my heart pounding in my chest, and felt something inside me crack, splinter, and finally break free. We sat there in silence for a long time, the waitress coming by once to refill our cups, her eyes flicking between us like she could sense the unspoken weight hanging in the air. When he finally stood, his chair scraping against the worn tile floor, he clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. You take care of yourself, Ryan. Don't let them drag you back. I managed a small, tight nod. My throat too tight to speak, and watched as he made his way to the door. His broad shoulders hunched against the cold as he stepped back into the gray morning light. I sat there for a long time after he left, my coffee growing cold in my hands, my mind a tangled mess of memories and regrets, of lost time and missed opportunities. But as I finally pushed back my chair, tossed a few crumpled bills onto the table, and stepped out into the biting wind, I felt something like hope, a small, stubborn flicker of it deep in my chest. I didn't know where I was going or what came next, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done being a ghost in my own life. As I walked down the frozen street, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts, my boots crunching against the fresh snow, I whispered into the cold, empty air, I'm done. Story 2. My children were banned from my mom's 60th birthday because the party was adults only. But then I saw everyone else bringing their kids. Your children wouldn't fit in, my mom said, so I left early. The next day I did this and everyone went crazy. Hi, my name is Rachel Whitlow. I'm 29, married, have 2 sons and a master's degree in special education. I work full-time at a public elementary school and somehow still find the time to remember everyone's birthdays and my extended family usually before they do. And yet, despite all that, I've spent most of my life being told I'm too sensitive, too intense, or my personal favorite, just looking for attention. Middle child syndrome. I used to think that was it. I have an older brother named Chris who's a dentist and a younger sister named Chelsea who still refers to herself as the baby, even though she's 26 and owns a photography business. Me, I'm the one who always volunteered to host. Always made sure everyone's kids had a place to snooze and always took up the slack when someone failed to bring a dish to family occasions. But none of that stopped me from being treated like the family afterthought. So when I got the invitation to my mom's 60th birthday celebration, I'll confess I was caught off guard. First of all, it was formal, like printed in the mail. Formal. My mom is an event coordinator, so that aspect wasn't shocking. What was surprising was the short, italicized note at the bottom. Adults only. Please, let's keep it nice. I read it 3 times, then again, then passed it to my husband David and said, Is it just me, or does it seem pointed? He squinted. You mean like directed at us or at Liam? Liam's my oldest. He's 7. Brilliant humorist. His fascination with dragon training has made him a walking encyclopedia of dragon knowledge. In our family, he is essentially a unicorn that everyone pretends not to see since he has autism. My younger child, Max, is 5 years old and has the natural ability to win over cashiers. However, both of my children have attended every uncomfortable Thanksgiving, every reunion, and every birthday celebration. Furthermore, we have never been instructed not to bring them. It seemed targeted to be sure, but I didn't want to cause a scene. That's the problem with being referred to as theatrical throughout your life. To show that you're not you, eventually begin to tread carefully. So, I RSVP'd, grabbed a dress, and made a sitter reservation. Indeed, this fancy winery just outside of town was the venue for the celebration. It's Instagram's birthday, string lights and valley parking, a cake that was so large it most likely had its own zip code. Already a bit tense from the entire exclusion incident, I entered by myself. Then I noticed it. Balloons, little plates, folded name cards with sparkling marker lettering, and the children's table, and chuckling while seated, consuming cake. My nieces, nephews, and half a dozen cousins' children were having a great time. I felt as though I had been smacked as I stood still in the doorway. Smacked me because I didn't misunderstand, not in a figurative sense. I wasn't going overboard. I was left out. My children were left out. I made an effort to assume the best of her. Perhaps there was a last-minute alteration. Perhaps she neglected to inform everyone else when she informed me it was exclusively for adults. That would be detrimental. Yes, but perhaps not malevolently. Then I noticed the magician, the balloon artist, and the ridiculous puppet stage. I discovered my mother laughing with Chris and Chelsea outside the terrace sipping a drink. She seems taken aback by my presence. Rachel, as if I were the one who had unexpectedly arrived, she said. Isn't this lovely? I wasted no time. I assumed this was a gathering for adults only. She cocked her head and blinked at me as if I were the issue. Well, it was simply more convenient to suggest that you are aware of Liam's personality. I simply gazed at her. He gave a stiff, courteous grin. Your kids wouldn't be accepted. There was no miscommunication error or choice made. My children were purposefully excluded because they didn't fit in, even though I had to explain the party to them and then make up an excuse for their inability to go. Only my children, not all of them. From behind her wine glass, Chelsea added her voice. You understand, I'm sure. And I did at that very moment. Oh, I got it exactly. I said nothing at all. I didn't cause any trouble. I simply walked past the bubble machine, past the glittery name cards, past the magician who was taking scarves out of his sleeve and out to my car. As I sat in the driver's seat with my hands shaking and my dress tucked under me, I came to a realization that I should have had years earlier. They never wanted me to fit in, so they never wanted my kids to either. That night, I didn't get any sleep. While David slept next to me like a man unconcerned by generational trauma, I lay there staring at the ceiling with one arm draped across my forehead like I was in some sort of Victorian melodrama. I kept mentally reliving it. My mother's voice, that smug, condescending grin, and those 4 unexpectedly powerful words. Your kids wouldn't be accepted. No, couldn't come. No, it was a mistake, they'd be out of place. Similar to mismatched puzzle pieces, as if we were out of place. I saw Liam sitting cross-legged on the rug in the living room, wearing his handcrafted dragon wings and describing the toothless tail fin for the 20th time. Just to feel included, I considered having Max provide totally irrelevant dinosaur information. I also believed that this was nothing new. This wasn't even unexpected. For the first time, they had been so open about it. Let's go back. I was the sensitive one growing up, the melancholy one, and the attention seeker, of course. This incidentally is funny. In a household like mine, you know what gets you less attention: having opinions and prying, being unique. At a Marsh family dinner, would you choose to be invisible? Simply put, let your feelings be known. I composed a poem on loneliness for a school assignment when I was 9 years old. I read it to my mother in the hopes that she would say something encouraging. Oh, darling, you don't have to make everything about you, she murmured, looking up from her magazine. I experienced a panic attack once again while on a family trip. At 15, I was having trouble breathing. Tunnel vision, tight chest, everything. My father questioned whether I was lying. My mother advised me to lie down till I was able to act properly once more. At the same time, Chris stubbed his toe once, which prompted 3 people to hurry over with ice and a cushion to elevate it. I immediately discovered that neutral cheerfulness was the only feeling that was permitted in our home. Be amiable, keep silent, take it easy. None of those things applied to me. Liam now. He's not, in fact. It's not that he doesn't try. Though he was born into a world that doesn't always make sense to him, God, he tries. He is making every effort to decipher it. Actually, one medicine at a time. After a protracted draining procedure that entailed more paperwork than purchasing our home, he received his diagnosis last year. My mom blinked as if I had just told her that he had 3 heads when I told my parents. She stirred her tea and muttered, "Oh well, you were always dramatic." Okay, since autism is only a new manifestation of attention-seeking, it seems that we both contracted it from the same hypothetical virus. David was prepared to leave. I wasn't in contact at the time. I still harbored a little betraying hope that they might change their minds. That they would understand if I gave them enough explanations and demonstrated Liam's intelligence, kindness, and deservingness. They didn't. He's so intense, they would say. Perhaps if he interacted with others. Do you believe he makes excuses for it? Max received nothing but praise despite being noisy, wiggly, and forgetting to flush the toilet 40% of the time. What a decent young child. Observe those etiquette. He's simply very laid back. I became aware of the trend. Simple, adorable, challenging. Equals are accepted. People with autism are excluded. Not by chance either. Intentionally. Similar to the birthday celebration. At first I didn't understand, but now I do. The purpose of that invitation was everything but elegant. It was about making sure they were comfortable, since Liam, God forbid, may play abnormally, talk excessively about dragons, become overstimulated by the commotion, or just act in a way that makes people uncomfortable since it's not how they're used to living. What else, though, makes people wriggle? The truth. In all honesty, my family has also never understood how to handle me when I received a college scholarship. Whoa! I didn't anticipate that when I purchased our first home. Having a spouse who manages finances must be pleasant. When I first began teaching, that is. Oh, so you spend your days playing with children. Every success I've achieved has been attributed to either David or my additional effort, or to serendipity. Every unpleasant situation I've encountered has been reframed as my own fault for being challenging. My mother advised me to try smiling more while I was experiencing postpartum depression. My dad stated after Liam was diagnosed, "Like you, I'm confident he'll get over it." I never outgrew anything. I overcame it. They made jokes, they remained silent, and they made casual remarks that made me feel bad about who I was. And now when it's aimed at my son, I'm expected to consume the same poison? Oh no, thank you. When you finally stop making excuses for other people, it's strange how quickly things start to make sense. I knew what I needed to do by the next morning. David was already on board. Over coffee, he said, "We're done, right?" I gave a nod. Yes, we're finished. But the pictures began to come in before I could catch my breath. Facebook, Instagram. My cousin Emily texted me. Why hadn't the lads shown up? They have an entire craft table with a dragon theme. Liam would have gone crazy. He would have Emily. There were images of Max's relatives playing tag in similar clothes and group shots of the kids' table. Naturally, my kid was watching a dragon-themed puppet performance video at home and asked me why we couldn't attend Grandma's birthday. The kicker at the craft table, too. I contributed to the cost. Yes, everyone contributed to the party's funding. Depending on our income, my siblings and I each contributed. We gave more since David and I make more money than Chris and Chelsea do. In summary, I covered the cost of the event. I covered the cost of the performer. The project was purchased by me, and my kids were purposefully kept out of it. It was no longer merely personal after that. It turned into disdain and scorn, disposability. So I composed a comp email. Courteous Cliff. Hello, Mother. I saw that the gathering was not exclusively for adults. I also saw that every child with the exception of mine liked the activities I helped fund. Since the event was misrepresented, I would like our donation to be refunded. Furthermore, David and I are not going to the next family reunion, or stepping aside for the time being. Rachel. Just facts. No rage, no lengthy justification. I will address this later, but the consequences is imminent. As Max attempts to convince me that it spits actual fire, I'm currently simply sitting here watching Liam construct a cardboard dragon out of cereal boxes. And I feel almost at peace for the first time in a long time. People that treat you like you're disposable are the subject of this interesting truth. When you really get rid of them, they usually freak out. I forwarded the email to my mother. Brief, straightforward, nothing noteworthy. I pushed submit, shut down my laptop, and instantly felt like I needed a nap and a drink. In a little quiet toast to choosing violence in a civilized manner, David lifted his coffee. To get rid of the whole Marsh family before 10 in the morning, I gave him a feeble grin. We waited after that, just 3 hours were needed. Mom didn't give me a call, obviously not. She added a single comment above the email and shared it to the family group chat. I'm simply devastated. I am unsure of how to react to this. Chelsea began to respond to Helvetica's passive aggression with an avalanche of emotional manipulation. Why you're doing this to Mom is beyond me. She put a lot of effort into that Chris party. Liam suffers with major events, as we all know. Mom could have been attempting to shield him from my Aunt Karen, who wasn't even there at the celebration. I believe Rachel is simply overburdened. New academic year, 2 children. It's quite a bit. Let her have some space. The story of the overburdened mother, I suppose. Much more reassuring than having to confront the reality that I was purposefully left out. I didn't respond. I gave them space to speak. It seems to be the worst thing you can do if you've ever been called tough, because quiet. Power is that. When you eventually learn to utilize it, they detest it. My mother finally snapped and texted me personally the next day. I apologize if you were offended. I didn't mean to do that. However, requesting reimbursement seems trivial. You made a contribution to a family gathering, the same as everyone else. Hold on. The same as everyone else. My contribution was $600. Chelsea donated $200. Chris contributed $150 and didn't submit his until the week before. Not exactly the same then. I didn't receive the same as everyone else too. The children of everyone else had a party. The one I had a babysitter. David mumbled when I showed him the text. Instead, an invoice ought to have been sent. I felt inclined to respond in writing. The money isn't the point. It has to do with being misled. You should have had the guts to say it if you wanted my children to be left out. However, it was deliberate to tell me it was adults only before putting on a real puppet performance. All I'm doing is changing how involved I am. She didn't respond. But who did this, do you know? Taking the high road, which allegedly entails drinking a half glass of roses and beginning every phrase with, "I'm just trying to help," made her appear quite proud when she FaceTimed me. Really, Rach, is it possible for us to discuss this without actually doing anything? I didn't make a blink. What a stuff. You mean when I helped pay for a party and my kids weren't invited? She let out a sigh. This is what you usually do. You make everything about Liam and exclusion. It's draining, wearying out. My emotions were back. Wearying out. My children, neurodivergent, wearying out. I kept smiling and refusing to stop talking. Wearying out. I didn't shout. I refrained from crying. We're done acting like this is normal, I simply stated. I meant what I said. Tell Mom. I hung up after that. For now, I blocked her. Something unexpected occurred that weekend. The group chat for cousins came alive. Only a few of individuals supported me this time. Emily sent me a private message. I was unaware that your invitation was for adults only. It's screwed up. Then Sarah, who has previously had her own conflict with my mom, texted, "You have my admiration. I am aware of their behavior." The news had apparently begun to circulate. My kids were the only ones allowed to attend the adults-only celebration. People were conversing and the rest of the family was unrestricted. By Monday, my mother attempted something else. He gave David a call. Indeed, she completely ignored me and contacted my husband, who a year before had been on the verge of cutting them off. Only after I pleaded with him not to make things more difficult did he continue attending family gatherings. This time, when he was changing a light fixture in the kitchen, she put him on speaker. He hardly spoke, simply listened as she sobbed about feeling assaulted and losing her daughter. "I know Rachel listens to you," she said. "Would you kindly explain to her how much he is harming everyone?" "No, she understands perfectly," he responded after turning off the light and pausing. "You're simply angry." At last, she stopped allowing it to occur. He hung up after that. I stood there looking at him as if he were a whole different kind of human, and I didn't say anything at first when he told me, because I recognized then that he was the first person to ever unconditionally support me. I was taught that love required emotional gymnastics, perseverance, and tolerance. I learned from David that safety is love. My mother sent one final note on Tuesday. "If you're truly interested in this, I suppose there is nothing I can do to split the family apart. However, I hope you consider the example you're giving your children." And I did. I gave it a lot of thinking. What was I modeling? I was demonstrating to them that power does not lie in quiet. You shouldn't have to shrink in order to be included. If you don't appreciate that love, it's simply manipulation in a fancy typeface. I answered that afternoon. I'm using limits as an example. That my children don't have to change who they are to be accepted, and that love isn't gained by tolerating cruelty. You didn't just leave them out. In a family that ought to have loved them unconditionally, you made them feel like outcasts. It's not a miscommunication. It's a decision. I'm currently creating my no signature, no emoticons, just the facts. I wanted to know the kicker, so I blocked her. The family get-together is not going well. 2 months was when he was expected to be. The Airbnb has not been reserved. No spreadsheet has been created. Nobody organized transport, food, or activities. Who did all that in the past? His guests, me? The attention seeker, Rachel. The dramatic Rachel. Rachel, who only seems to be useful when she's working without me in the background. The fractures are visible and the adhesive is gone. Last night, Emily messaged once more. So is it wrong that I'm a little relieved that someone stated it at last? To be honest, I've always felt uneasy with the way people discuss Liam behind your back. Behind my back? Naturally. However, it is no longer the case. I'm not a secret. My son doesn't feel guilty. And you can no longer rent my quiet. You would think that the message would be obvious enough if my whole immediate family was blocked. However, no. People like my mother don't back down when called out, so they doubled down. They get back together, and individuals such as my sister. They use the group chat to discuss fight tactics. I knew something was wrong when I noticed David standing by the window one Saturday morning with his cup frozen halfway to his mouth. He said, "You won't believe this." I glanced up from Liam's scientific project about cereal spills. I'll believe anything if it has to do with Chelsea clowns or emotional blackmail. He moved out of the way. Aurie. They were there. The three of them. Chelsea, Chris, and my mother stood on my front porch as if they were shooting a Dr. Phil intervention. The narcissist version. Don't respond to it. Instinctively, I said. David, however, is almost halfway out the door because he enjoys commotion like this. She doesn't want to talk to you, he says, opening it just enough. Like the ghost of every passive-aggressive PTA mother, my mom communicates through the void. All we want to do is put things right. Correct. It's really wealthy. This is literally going to ruin the reunion because putting things right reportedly involves Chelsea blurting and Chris screaming, "You made Grandma weep." They were concerned about that. Not my children. Not excluded. The reunion. I chose not to approach the door. I remained on the ground the entire time. My folks tried to gaslight me from the lawn while Liam and I sat there attaching glitter to cardboard wings. They eventually gave up. David shut the door. I said, Liam said. Grandma was shouting, but why? She believed she was in command. I said. With a serious nod, he resumed his gluing. Online, the next hit appeared. You see, this secret forum is used by our extended family. Somehow, a message board from the early 2000s survived. Consider it the nosy, uncomfortable cousin of Facebook. We share plans for reunions, birthdays, pleas for prayers, and the odd passive-aggressive meme there. Chelsea made the first post with the caption, "Family isn't supposed to hurt," started with. I contemplated saying something, but keeping quiet breeds animosity. We are all aware of the recent turmoil. Some people have made the decision to distance themselves from their family and get angry about situations that may have been resolved amicably, handled with elegance. I'll translate. As they handed me the bill and omitted my kids, I was expected to grin. The statement continued by saying, I attacked Mom on her milestone birthday, demanded money back like it was ransom, and refused to forgive honest mistakes. There was a wide range of comments. I received encouraging pats on the head from several of the elder relatives, some of whom hadn't seen me since 2014. You only get one family, but they are difficult. It seems like someone needs a sleep in Jesus. I remained silent. Not quite yet. Because you learn to gather receipts before you speak after being accused of overreacting your entire life. I posted one response the next morning. Only one. Setting the record straight is the title I gave it. I then included a PDF. A snapshot of my invitation to adults only was attached. Let's maintain our elegance. A party shot with the children's table coated in glitter. Magician and balloon artist. The $600 I transferred via Venmo was marked as Mom's 60th per family divide, a record of the $400 I had already contributed to the previous reunion. 2 years ago, Airbnb paid $300 for Christmas dinner. A censored message from my mom joking that you were always a bit theatrical, and $250 for Grandma's 85th birthday cake. Really, Liam understands. Next, my note. The reunion was not wrecked by me. I simply stopped planning it. It wasn't me that broke up the family. I only brought attention to a fact that everyone was too kind to voice out. Here, not all of us were ever completely accepted. We were tolerated in part. While some of us were silently moved away, others were observed. I will no longer remain silent about the fact that my son was not excluded by mistake. I then logged off. David peeked, but I didn't check the comments again. It broke the form, apparently. I received private messages from certain family members thanking me. Others completely stopped answering. Some of the older cousins emailed my mom to offer their support, and one of them inquired as to whether the reunion was still planned or not. We weren't. Nobody offered to host. Nobody could agree on who was provoking stress or who was in the group conversation. Like a Jenga tower constructed on denial, the entire thing collapsed. We thus threw our own celebration. It's simply a birthday, not a reunion. Liam had his 8th birthday. Not everyone received an invitation. Only a handful had supported us. Emily with her children. Aunt Lucy, who discreetly left the forum and sent Liam a note that read, "You fit in exactly as you are, along with my coworker Marla and her spouse, and a couple of our neighbors." Naturally, he donned his dragon wings. Max was adamant about being a wizard of fire. They featured a cupcake bar, a scavenger hunt, and a handcrafted piñata in the shape of a volcano, which Liam happily destroyed after lecturing us on its scientific errors. It was cheerful, serene, and little. "Mom, I really like this party," Liam remarked, turning to face me with icing on his cheek. "It's not the type that wears me out. And since cupcakes are everything I've ever desired, I almost sobbed into them. Not flawless, not glitzy approval. All we needed was a space to breathe. People occasionally ask me if I regret the way things turned out. Not even a bit, actually. The family wasn't destroyed by me. I just quit acting as like it wasn't already broken. And I created something new in the silence that followed. Real, but not larger or louder, compared to Liam. This is a perfect suit for him. 3 years have passed. Liam is now 11 years old. But I'm still like dragons. He now includes marine predators and dinosaurs. At the dinner table, he once gave a 20-minute TEDx lecture about the Dunkley estate's hunting habits. They both ended up crying from laughter, even though Max feigned to nod off in the middle. Last year, David and I relocated. New locality, larger yard. There are no emotional landmines hidden beneath family get-togethers. And those who now visit our house, it is they who decide to arrive with love rather than expectations. The reunion never got better. I believe there are still 2 distinct family group conversations. Neither am I. Chelsea once sent a card for Christmas. I didn't open it. What about my mother? She continues to tell others that I cut off contact. She is correct. However, Liam and I were spared by the distance. That's what Christmas is all about. What do you think then? Did I make the correct decision? Was I severe enough or too harsh? Tell me in the comments below. Click subscribe if you would like to hear more tales like this one. Story 3. It was my first Christmas with family in years when I returned from duty. Dad texted, "Without you, Christmas is more enjoyable. Don't come." I said just one word in response, "I get it." After that, I quietly changed a few documents. One of their lawyers' 7 missed calls was discovered 48 hours later. Caleb is my name. My age is 28. Until recently, he was the U.S. Army Staff Sergeant who sent home half of his monthly salary. I believed it to be the definition of family. For the past year, I have been stationed in Germany. It has been nearly 4 years since I last saw my family in person. There are only so many occasions when you can go halfway around the world to feel like an afterthought in your own homeroom, not because I didn't want to. Nevertheless, I was hopeful this year. It in fact is humorous. Someone with tactical risk assessment training should know better than to continually placing bets on people who never show up. However, I suppose that before I am a military, I am a human. And even when we shouldn't, people have hope. I was quite thrilled to learn that I had been granted permission to take Christmas leave. Since I enlisted, I had not spent the holidays at home. I imagined my mother being upset and maybe reserving a seat at the table for me. I saw my father bringing me a beer without seeming strange. I even foolishly believed that my sister may inquire about my life rather than her own auto issues. I thus made the flight reservation, not refundable. Because it seems that I also think that miracles happen, I got leave after messaging my mother. "I'll spend Christmas at home. I'm excited to meet everyone." The message caused her heart to respond. Nothing to say. Only a little red heart. I made an effort not to interpret it too strongly. Yes, I did. I allowed myself to think everything would be fine for a few days. That instead of anxiety, I would return home to warmth. That the folks I'd been providing monthly financial support to would want me there for reasons other than money. Then 12 days before Christmas, I was standing in the base kitchen halfway through a stale protein bar when my phone chimed. My dad gave it to me. "Without you, Christmas is more enjoyable. Don't come." I kept looking at it thinking it was an error or a joke. Anything. My sister followed up 2 minutes later. It will just cause awkwardness. Don't show up. Please. That one struck more forcefully than it ought to have. It sounded like the type of text you write about an ex, not your own brother, not because she had ever been warm. I refrained from arguing. I didn't inquire as to why. I just responded. I get it. I would lie if I said I didn't feel anything or that I was accustomed to it. Soldiers lie to themselves in order to get a better night's sleep. No, I was devastated. Not too loudly, not in a big way. In that comfortable, calm way that makes you feel something from the inside out. You move. It won't move back either. Then another thing occurred. Not rage. That's right. Not retaliation. Just some clarification. I signed into the systems where my name was still active that evening. For 3 years, I had been providing temporary coverage for the joint utility account. Since she lost her job, my sister's auto insurance has been surreptitiously charged to my card. And above all, the mortgage payment portal to which I had been making monthly payments. I didn't own the house even if I was never included on the paperwork, but I had contributed to its survival. After his layoff, my dad was unable to qualify on his own. The approval was made feasible by my income and credit score. Since then, I've been the unseen support system that nobody has noticed. I thus made some subtle adjustments. I started by turning off the automatic transfers. I then formally emailed the mortgage servicer to inform them that I would no longer be making financial contributions and that the principal borrower identified should be contacted for any correspondence. My dad. Are you certain? On the phone, the representative asks. It can result in a need for refinance or a delay in payments. I gave a nod. I'm sure she couldn't see me, though. After that, I did something that I can't quite describe. Nevertheless, I flew home. Yes, I am aware of it. I was warned not to come. It was obvious that I was not welcome. However, the ticket was reserved, and perhaps a depressed, obstinate part of me needed to finish it so I could return home one final time. I arrived 2 days before Christmas, even if I didn't enter the house. Took a taxi directly to a cheap hotel off the highway rather than renting a vehicle. The sort where the drapes have mysterious stains and the walls are thin. I gazed at the town while perched on the side of the bed. The lights were familiar to me. The stores and the chilly wind blowing through the bare trees are the same. However, I felt out of place here. A stranger who had outstayed his welcome in his own life made me feel that way. I didn't pass the house or make another attempt to contact them. I simply waited until the following day. My phone was constantly buzzing. I had 7 missed calls, 1 from my sister, 2 from a blocked number, 3 from my dad, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize until the voicemail came on. This is Nathan Calloway, your parents' attorney, Mr. Morgan. I've been notified that you have stopped providing them with mortgage-related financial support. It makes sense that they are worried. Before this causes more issues, I would like to talk to you. Difficulties. I stared at the phone and whispered. They were worried now, if I were sending money across the Atlantic, that is. Not when I was missing. Birthdays, holidays, entire years of my own life. No. Now that the money stopped, I didn't call back. I ordered cheap takeout, pulled the thin motel curtains shut, and let the silence wrap around me like armor. I was officially home for Christmas, just not where they could see me. And for the first time in years, I felt the edge of something I hadn't tasted in a long time. Control. I don't remember the first time I felt like the outsider in my own family. I just remember realizing it had always been that way. There wasn't one big event, no dramatic get out of my house moment, just a slow accumulation of moments where I was reminded politely, passively, or with a smirk that I was useful but not essential. Present but not central. I was 8 when my sister Haley was born. She came into the world red-faced and squalling, and my parents treated her like she had descended directly from heaven on a personal cloud. My dad said she was the miracle baby, which always made me wonder what that made me a warm-up act. To be fair, I was a quiet kid. Not brooding or weird, just low maintenance. I read books lined up. My toy soldiers got decent grades. No one worried about me, and in my family, not needing help meant not getting attention. My dad was a foreman at a steel company back then. Big personality, big laugh, strong ideas. He was the type of man who felt emotion was a weakness, unless it comes out of a clenched fist or a shouted voice. If I sobbed, he told me to knock it off. If I got silent, He called me theatrical whenever I got furious. I was instructed to cease acting like a female. My mom was softer, but in that misty, foggy manner where you're not totally sure she's in the room with you. She'd forget parent-teacher conferences, lose track of when my sports sessions were occasionally fail to prepare lunch. But she recalled Haley's ballet performances, her playdates, her favorite munchies. I wasn't unloved, just overlooked, unless I'd done anything incorrect. When I reached 16, I acquired a half-time job at a nearby gas station. I saved every dime. In my dream, I would use it to get a second-hand automobile, get out, and perhaps drive till I felt like I was seeing more of the globe. However, after a month, my dad took out a loan from my funds to address a roof leak. Haley's Sweet 16 featured a DJ and gourmet cupcakes, but the roof was never restored. At 19, I enlisted in the Army. I was not stopped. Figures, my father said. My mother wept, but it seemed theatrical, as if she believed that was the role of mothers. Haley said absolutely nothing. She probably thought I would return at some point and circle them as usual. Although boot camp was harsh, I found it to be logical. Rules were in place. Anticipations, repercussions. You earned something if you put in the effort. You were involved with something. I felt like I belonged for the first time in my life. Nothing changed at home in the meanwhile. Or rather, everything was different. I was also kept in the dark. I found out that my father had been let go from the plant when my mother shared a link to a GoFundMe page on Facebook. "Hard times trying to stay afloat," was the caption. Every bit counts. I had never wired the money before. I never even considered it. I just sent $2,000 after logging into my military account. My father didn't express gratitude. I just sent an SMS. "This month should be covered by it. Tell me when you'll be able to send more." It became usual after that. Electricity bill, auto insurance, the mortgage, every time there was a cause, always. Except for my mom and my dad's guilt trip. It won't last forever. The only one doing all right is you. Haley, on the other hand, was working part-time and trying to figure things out. She had her second vehicle collision when she was 22. I assisted her in purchasing a second-hand SUV and covered the deductible. She texted me only one word: regards. She shared a photo with a comment a month later: "You get what you deserve when you put in the effort." I remained silent. I just took a screenshot of it and stored it in the unpaid debts and unsaid things folder. They hardly looked up when I strolled in 4 years ago for Christmas, which was my last serious try. Storage had taken the place of my former chamber. I slept through supper on the couch. To the one who always shows up. Haley, my dad, lifted a glass. I remained silent. Also didn't eat much. There was no present with my name on it the following morning. Only a mug with the words "Grumpy Vet" on it. Everyone chuckled. It's a joke, according to my mom. Being a walking joke makes you grin, so I did that. I stopped going back after that. I continued to make calls and send money. However, something inside of me began silently shutting doors one by one. Nevertheless, when I was granted vacation this year, I somehow still hoped. Perhaps I thought to myself they had changed. They could be pleased to see me if I showed up. I was me, not because I had sent money or resolved another difficulty. It was a foolish wish. However, permission is not always necessary for hope. Sometimes it simply appears. I considered everything now while I sat at a hotel off the highway. I've skipped birthdays, redirected paychecks, and buried versions of myself in order to maintain harmony. I considered how, despite my training in conflict zones, I was unable to survive in my own living room. I recalled that Haley had once told me I was overly dramatic because I didn't find it funny when someone impersonated a homeless veteran in order to get likes on a meme. I recalled my mother saying, "We love you." We simply can't demonstrate it well, as though I had failed to unravel the puzzle of love. After giving it some attention, I came to a realization that simultaneously hurt and healed. I didn't belong to that family. Not at all. All I've been doing is funding it. 2 days prior to Christmas, the calls began. I disregarded them at first, not with malice, because I didn't know them, at least not intentionally. Urgency. The instant a 503 area code appeared on my phone, I had finished dumping everything. Completed. For those who just remembered my number when something broke, I'm running damage control. It was a little wave at first. Dad missed a call. Haley left a message at 11:49 p.m. from an unidentified number, which was probably just late enough to be bothersome, but early enough to be dramatic. I didn't pay attention. The second wave followed. Before noon, 7 calls were missed. From the home one, landline, from Dad's cell 3, 1 from a number marked Callaway and Greenlaw office, and 2 from Haley. I was interested in that one. With my coffee cup in hand, I perched on the side of my hotel bed and gazed at the caller. ID thinks it might be self-explanatory. Curiosity eventually prevailed. I hit the play button. "This is Nathan Callaway, your parents' attorney, Mr. Morgan. I've been notified that you have stopped making payments on a jointly financed house. It seems sense that they are upset. Before this causes more issues, I would like to talk to you." "Difficulties," I mumbled. "Correct. Like regard for oneself." I didn't return the call. I had no desire to be controlled. I was aware of how this game operated. Convert worry into guilt. Make guilt seem like a responsibility and a hope. Before they had to deal with the repercussions of life without me, I folded. I went for a stroll instead, setting my phone on Do Not Disturb. That gentle early winter snow was falling. "A little dust for your shoulders, please." It is insufficient to create beauty. I recalled how the streets looked. A bit gray, a bit dreary. Somehow I had changed even though my hometown hadn't. I went by the bakery where on Saturday mornings I used to get inexpensive donuts. The sign was now faded. I was the one that rode my bike across town to bring Haley home after she was caught shoplifting there, so her father wouldn't know. She thanked me by saying she hadn't spoken to me in a week. Claimed I destroyed her vibe. I laughed in private, a depressing chuckle. The sort that has memories glued to it and sounds more like an exhalation. The receptionist looked at me as I returned to the motel. "For you, the front desk phone had been ringing nonstop. You're some sort of local celebrity," she said. That kind of thing. After saying that, I headed upstairs. I did what any emotionally healthy adult would have done that evening. I sat in the dark viewing old training videos on my laptop and opened the cheap whiskey I had purchased at the gas station. It reminded me of who I was when I wasn't being exploited, not because I missed deployment. Approximately 1 in the morning, messages appeared up to that point. There had been bewilderment and indignation. "Caleb, what the devil? You cannot simply leave your family behind. That money was necessary. What's the matter with you?" The tone changed now, though. "All day long, Mom has been weeping. Dad claims to be experiencing chest symptoms. This quiet of yours is killing them." In an attempt to manipulate emotions, I lifted my glass to the ceiling. Vintage 1995, and still going strong. I nearly gave in. I did it because I was conditioned to do so, not because I believed them. To carry, to calm, to solve. But then my CO reminded me of something. Once informed me, "Often your silence speaks louder than your words." I thus preserved it. By the morning of Christmas Eve, the dramatic messages had given way to biblical ones. Please, there were Bible verses. Haley made a mysterious post that said, "When they were famished, some individuals can't remember who fed them." A family picture follows. Her parents are sitting on the couch and the wall has 3 stockings. Mine was absent. That's when I finally spoke out. Not over the phone, not with a message, only one post. "Just so we're clear" is the title of a picture album. Additionally, there was a statement that said, "Time's family isn't who you were born to. Who doesn't demand evidence whenever you claim to be exhausted? Screenshots, bank transfers, insurance payments, mortgage bills, with my routing information and totals for days that were blacked out were all included. Just receipts. No comments." The response came instantly. The comments came pouring in. I received private messages from several cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. "Are you serious, dude? All of that was paid for by you." They constantly gave the impression that you had abandoned them. Man, I didn't know. It screwed up. Within 1 hour, Mom's Facebook account went black. Dad uploaded a photograph of himself fishing as his new profile picture. Traditional avoidance. Haley made a passive-aggressive remark about folks who enjoy drama. I didn't answer, not allowed. However, I reserved a room at the hotel for an additional night at 6:32 p.m. Dad left me a voicemail. "Son, you've gone too far away. We were embarrassed by you, now I have no idea who you are. You were faithful once. You're being harsh now. Well done. Christmas has been destroyed by you. That was a lot of money. especially because I wasn't invited. Then Haley texted one last time at 7:10 p.m. "You got your message across. They're going crazy." Mom isn't eating. There is a threat from Dad to sell the house. "Are you content now?" I was honest, but I wasn't happy. I was honest with myself for once. I typed a response after spending a lot of time staring at the computer. I then removed it. Rather, I sat with the stillness once more and understood that I wasn't waiting for them to comprehend. I was at last learning to cut out the explanations. "Are you happy now?" was Haley's last text message, and I didn't reply. Since I wasn't. Not at all. I didn't justify it or feel victorious. Simply exhausted. As if someone had finally released the handle after 10 years of hauling a bag uphill. There was stillness when I woke up on Christmas morning. No guilt bombs, no calls, no threats. Only the flashing light on my phone and the hum of the hotel mini fridge. An unidentified caller left an unread voicemail. I hit the play button. It's Mr. Calloway. Once more, Caleb. "According to your parents who I spoke with, feelings are just running high at the moment. They want to meet face to face. No pressure, of course, but I think this could be resolved with a calm conversation." My gaze was fixed on the ceiling. Decide what precisely the gaslighting of the family for 10 years, the hostage predicament in terms of money. Nevertheless, I was intrigued. I replied with a time and place via text. 6 p.m. tomorrow, Route 12's Denison's Diner. Back of the booth, public space, neutral ground. Less opportunities to scream, or if they did at a lower level. I kept the fact that I would be bringing someone else a secret. I ordered coffee and was there 10 minutes early the following evening. No food. I didn't have faith in my stomach's behavior. It was silent. Dim illumination. Holiday lights are still glowing as if they haven't received the memo, and there is an old jukebox in the corner. I went with the rear booth, the type where every exit and entrance were visible. At precisely 6:03 p.m. they entered. Mom gripping her handbag like it could go away without her. Haley and wearing large sunglasses indoors either as a fashion statement or as a feeble camouflage, while Dad wore a rigid overcoat and his jaw was set like stone. Without a word, they slipped inside the booth. I didn't say hello to them. I simply watched. Dad was the first to go. "This is already ugly enough. We don't want it to grow any worse." Mom added, her voice brittle. "We are a family. Everybody has spoken something they didn't mean to say." Haley took a whiff. However, it was low to put our private information online. "Even for you, Caleb." I recline. "Even for me." A thought-provoking perspective. Dad's eyes narrowed. "Your mother was embarrassed by you. Your sister." Me. I took a drink of my coffee. "No, you did it on your own. I simply quit hiding it." Haley's sunglasses somewhat slid. She had crimson eyes. "You didn't need to interrupt us." I interjected. That house was being paid for in part by someone who was not permitted to enter it for Christmas. Let's not act as though logistics were involved." Dad's fists were clenched on the table. "This is what we came here to fix. However, no one is playing anything if you continue to play the victim." My voice was flat as I spoke. I just ceased to finance my own erasure. I took out a hefty, well-tabbed folder from within my coat. Let's be clear because everyone is present. Inside the documents of each transfer I had done, I slipped it across the table. I have a written statement from the lender attesting to the fact that I had stopped making payments on each account. Haley's auto insurance history, including a snapshot of everyone they'd casually overlooked. Mom's face became white. Dad's red. Haley's lips formed a line so tightly that I was afraid she could burst. Mom muttered, "We didn't ask for all of that." I said you didn't have to. You simply anticipated it. Dad hit the table with a smash. "Do you believe that this elevates you above us?" "No," I answered softly. "I'm simply too dumb to continue paying individuals who treat me like a burden." Haley tore her sunglasses off. "You're being unkind. This is what you're doing to your own family." "Family is a reciprocal relationship. I've been walking it alone for years," I said. The bell over the restaurant entrance came next. It jingled. I didn't need to search. I was aware beforehand. Uncle Tom, cane in hand, strode in. The silver hair was brushed back, eyes as keen as ever. His coat was older than mine, and a look that set the whole booth on edge. "Well," he answered in a composed tone, "this is comfortable." Dad got to his feet. His face flickered with panic. "I had no idea you were in town, Tom." "You never do." Tom spoke those words. "That is your issue." He faced me. "Nice to see you, Caleb. Are you doing better now?" He glanced at my parents. "Next, Haley. I was informed of the communications, how you addressed him, the attorney, the sobbing." "Ron, you were always an excellent actor." Dad's jaw dropped open. Nothing was revealed. "Funny thing," Tom added. "Caleb never asked for anything when he came to visit me last year, quietly, mind you. Assisted me with gutter cleaning. Talked to me as though I were important. And he was the only person that showed up when I had that health scare. And to be there, he flew across from another continent." Mom opened her mouth. Tom held out his hand. "Keep it." Then he produced a sealed packet from inside his coat. In front of my dad, he dropped it on the table. "2 weeks ago, I signed my amended will. The only one who benefits is Caleb. It was nuclear quiet, the savings, the home, and the land. It's all about him." Haley's jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me?" "No," Tom answered. "I take repercussions seriously." Dad appeared to have taken a punch. "You're interrupting us." "I'm cutting the rot at last," Tom stated. "You can't argue with it either. I submitted it with my lawyer after having it notarized." He faced me once again. "I ought to have taken action sooner." "I apologize for waiting." I gave a nod. "Strict throat. You completed it on schedule." Tom turned and walked away. "Don't be theatrical." Only the soft tapping of his cane on the tile floor. I got up and placed some money on the table. "Thank you for the meeting." Mom blinked quickly. "Please, Caleb. You choose what to do." "I claimed this as my own," Dad snarled. "You're just going to go, then following everything that we done for you." I gave him a direct look. "I didn't get anything from you. I was harmed by you. I'm finished now." That evening, I returned to the hotel. Haley sent me one final message. "I no longer know who you are," I whispered to the empty room without responding. Someone who at last figured out how to get out. Epilogue. After 2 months, I felt something I hadn't felt in years as I stood in the center of Uncle Tom's living room, surrounded by moving boxes. Silence. Not quiet. The negative, guilt-ridden sort, but actual silence. Calm. After the estate was settled, I took another leave of absence. Everything was handled by the lawyer with ease. Just a handover of ownership from someone who saw me, really saw me, to someone who at last realized what being seen might mean: no drama, no difficulties. The house was quiet, ancient, and little, yet it belonged to me. And it was because someone thought I deserved more than just survival, not because I had earned it by blood guilt or duty. On the mantle, I have a picture of Uncle Tom and me from our most recent visit. I can't even recall what we were laughing about while we were sitting on his porch. All I can recall is the expression on his face. Pride. It's that uncommon type of love that suddenly appears without warning. Since that night at the cafe, neither Haley nor my parents have talked to me. After the whistle was made public, there were a few messages. Some are accusing, some are pleading. I didn't feel bad about blocking them all. No more. You have no acquaintances, your tranquility just because they are descended from you. Family may be a drain at times, and when you eventually stop allowing them, liberation might sometimes result. I have no idea what I will do next. Perhaps I will transform the house into something significant. A resting place for veterans. Or perhaps I'll just spend some time there. Learn to live without anticipating the effects of your actions. I'm not looking back anyway. I appreciate you listening. It was really difficult to relate this tale, but perhaps it was necessary for someone to hear it. Tell me in the comments below. Do you believe I made the correct decision? How would you have responded to it? Remember to subscribe if you'd want to hear more tales like this one.